All right, so here's some of my trades for today. So Facebook here, it was more just a intraday setup. I saw a compression happening here. This was before the Fed spoke, but I liked this compression. It looked like it could break down. However, it had already broken down in the morning and failed to continue. So I liked it for a break up. And you can see here on the, oops, see here on the 5 minute that basically there's a lot of volume here. This was sort of a triangle here that had broken up from, so it was kind of in between here, came down, and then again today came down, couldn't keep going. So now it's sort of stuck back in this volume, in this this area, and then it compressed. So then I was looking to take it long because I felt like it already tested down here, couldn't keep going, so it was compressing to get back towards the top up here. And that's what it did. So then here's how I managed it. It was close to 11:15, so things were slowing down. You know, this was really just sitting around VWAP, so I knew that was a little bit risky, meaning it was just gonna potentially chop around for a while. So I got in a position here with a wide stop. I think it was down here, and then didn't like it, and then for some reason I got out, but then got right back in. Felt like that, even though it was not as good of an entry. I held this one, so I held it all the way through here, and my plan was to add in once I saw some confirmation. And I'm not saying that the break of this trend line was confirmation. It was more like, because I had to keep moving this trend line around, it was more of this was confirmation. So it was the break of this line plus some volume. So I added, it held here for a flag, but then wicked down. I got out of my ad and then got my ad back in. So had to fight it a little bit. And this is why compressions are more difficult for me, because compressions don't have an exact level. It's more of a general trend, moving average levels that you're dealing with. So you really don't know exactly where the pullback is. So you have to be pretty flexible on your entry and your management of it until it gets really far away from you. So it did work out. I got a leg up, partialed a few times here, was going for the 330 here because it was a big ask, plus it was high of day, and I felt like it was going to get up there, but it took it all day to eventually do it. And I just sort of partialed throughout the day and kind of ran out of shares. It actually came back and stopped me out at break even. But I wanted to say one more time about this compression breakout is that even though this price action is kind of shitty, it was holding above my compression breakout. So I was still bullish even during this part. But you can see how much it came down before eventually going up, and it hit my break even. So for these compression breakouts, you really need to, the further you add up, your stop needs to be down here. It really needs to be more towards the middle of the compression, even a little bit below the VWAP, to give you this allowance of a pullback. So Futu, this was a price alert daily breakout. You can see here multiple days pushing against this 58.50, as well as right here. It was ascending up. I had an alert set for 58.50. Price actually opened or got above it in the pre-market. And so my idea was to get long as soon as it got above here. As long as we had some volume and some confirmation, I was going to play it long for the gap fill. Target would be $65. So since it was breaking my level in the pre-market and it had volume, if you can see here, this is what it looked like in the pre-market. We had some pretty decent volume, not quite opening volume, but we had 30,000-40,000 shares a minute. And so I got in at the break of 58.50. I think my stop was right here. I was only risking a half a unit because it was the pre-market. Got a partial here, and then held some for a while into the open. Kind of wish I wouldn't have partialed half here because this would have been worth a lot more, but ended up making a few units on that. So I think I made like 2.5 units and I risked half a unit. So I guess I made like 4 or 5 times what I risked, which was good. I also traded IWM. This wasn't the best trade. I totally understood the move. It just kind of shook me out. So here, obviously, it's breaking out on a higher time frame. The real breakout was today. However, I wasn't sure if that was going to happen. We had the move up to the higher time frame resistance. Had the doji, perfect setup for a 3-bar play. Play the breakout. This is the really big higher time frame breakout, and that's what happened. But it shook a lot of people out here and made a little tight range before doing that, and that's totally fine. That's just kind of my fault. I put in a limit order. Actually, no, I just bought with a wide stop, and of course it came all the way back down to low of day. So this was I need to learn when I do my wide stop that my stop needs to be below low of day, not below VWAP or any kind of whatever I think is support here. It needs to be below low of day, and that's okay because the idea is to add in somewhere later on and make it a big trend trade, which is what I was planning on. So that was a full loss, and then I got in really chasing it. This was a wide stop too. I can't remember how wide it was, maybe just low of the high breakout, and so I partialed really heavy here. I just didn't trade it all that well, so that's my fault. My intention was to make my money back because I didn't like how I chased this, and I was hoping for this to really pull back, and then I was going to get another really good ad. I was going to get in really heavy here and get the move, but man, it just did not pull back at all. Just straight up ripped, and then after that, it's straight up just went back, and then gave a nice little rip up again after the Fed talk. And then Tesla, I did try a low of day break with my risk being coming back inside the range, and it stopped me out. And then after the Fed talk, price was ripping for a few hours. It made a new kind of VPA signal here. You can see here, this was after this was on its own. So this was after the Fed talk, and this was a few hours later, but it made this little compression, new VPA. I then just risked high of day here, a little bit lower, and I actually got lucky. It did come all the way down, and then it moved. So I shouldn't have added here, but I thought this flag was going to hold, or I could have gotten out of my ad if it didn't hold and then kept this initial position. So that's a little bit of a bummer, but and then Fubo, this I'm swinging, and so I guess I thought I'd get fancy and be able to day trade it as well. I'm swinging it from right around here, this breakout. Targets are here, here, and then a higher small position remaining to go higher. Sort of felt like this was potentially making a 3-bar play, so but then I also really liked the higher R-vol and then the ascending triangle that it was making. Doesn't look all that pretty now that I look at it, but you can see these huge gaps just in between, and that's because this is just doesn't have a lot of volume on this stock. But it did respect the candles pretty well. So a top here, a top here, top here, higher lows. So I got in really wide stop, and then once it broke with some volume, I added in, risking just under there. It retested. I took a new high, new 1-minute high, added in again. So I was down. I was risking 3 units, really heavy, and I mainly did that because I really understand this level of risk here. This is a good high a day, and there was a perfect big ask at 35, and it kind of went along with my swing idea that this thing is strong, it's breaking out. It already hit this target, it's going to 35, maybe it'll do it today. It just happened to not do that, but I did make sure to pay myself a little bit here. This was 5%, and this was 10%. So I did pay myself just in case this thing did turn around, and that's what it did. Turned around, got out of some, it wicked up, and then it came back down, and then got out of the rest, and I think I got a little bit above break even, and so I probably got a little bit of slippage in here. Let it go down against me a little bit, but I knew I made this, so this allowed me to kind of wait and see. And yeah, you can see it flushed down under, and whether this thing still came up to 35 or not, the fact that it got down under, that makes this not a good trade for me. And so I'm glad I'm really proud of myself for getting in heavy, 3 units, being able to manage it, and then also getting out of it and being okay with it and not forcing any more trades. So overall, this was a really good experience for me. And, hopefully in the future, I'll pick a stock that gets that continuation, because had I made it to 35, I was holding the majority of the position for that big move. I would have made over 10 units, maybe even closer to 15 units had this been a legit breakout. So but I guess in terms of was this trade worth 3 units or not, because the daily range breakout is one of my favorite setups, and there's a lot of things that go into that. It needs to have higher RVOL, it needs to be within the ATR range so that it has potential to keep going. It needs to be it needs to have a really good level. What's the importance of the level? So is this a good level? It's not a 10 out of 10 level. It's just looking at this, it is a good level. It's at least a 7. But then when you zoom out to the higher time frame, is this a good level on a higher time frame? And it's hard to see, really. It's not perfect. Yeah. So, and it's not even a whole dollar. It's 34.20, 28. So no, it's not a 10 out of 10 level. A 10 out of 10 level would have been even better, and that would have warranted multiple units, more risk. And on top of that, this is a lower volume stock. It is jumping around, which lowers the quality of it as well. So that's not necessarily an A+. Here's the ATR, an average of $1.80 per day. Obviously, it's been moving more the last few days. But you can see here that this compression that I was playing with had only moved about 70% of its ATR, so not amazing. Would have wanted it to be more like 60% of an ATR or less. So really, after looking at it, it wasn't an A+ setup. It was a setup that I could totally trade, and then I could sort of use my own skills to figure out, but it's probably not worth 3 units, because had this not worked out, say this did gap a little bit too much and it did wick me out or fall down here pretty quick, I could have lost a few units real quick. So my favorite trade was probably this one, though, just because I understood it the most. I did like Facebook and how I held on and waited for this compression breakout. These are tricky. I do think that they're good plays. I do think if you find a nice trendline break, a lot of times that can be the spark that gets the stock going and gets the VPA back in play, gets the stock back in play, and that's what happened. This trendline break up, you can see VPA comes in and becomes in play again, and then the moves become cleaner. What I wasn't proud of was actually Futu. I was also proud of that daily range breakout. Oh yeah, so IWM I'm not proud of. I actually, this was tricky to add in. I would say what I wasn't proud of was I still had a share left here as it was coming back down, and my break even was down here. My idea was to get in super tight as soon as I felt like volume was coming back in. And I got in super tight here, and it was just a terrible entry because, I mean, look how many green candles there were, and I just happened to get in on the biggest sort of increased volume candle, and it needed to pull back a bit, and so it just stopped me out. But there were multiple ways to enter this properly. First of all, after the Fed talk, I should have calmed down for a second because it needed a few minutes to really get going. But I do think right on the break would have been fine entry, and then I could have even added in. I could have also added in at the high of the day, which I almost did. So there was just multiple ways to get in this with entries that I understand. This was totally chasey. So, because when you're talking about getting in and adding in, and also adding in really tight, you need to make sure that you really understand where you're getting back in. Like you need to have a really good pullback, a really good confirmation that it's going in the money almost right away. And this was not. This was emotional, but this was such a good move up that I'm sure I could have gotten in these easily and been in the money pretty quick. You know, I mean, the new 1 minute high right here was fine. This pullback and then the new break was fine. And then the high of day somewhere in here with a slightly wider stop, and then it keeps going is great there too. So, yep.